G'day legends, I hope that you're having a fantastic day and so far a fantastic week. Now I know I missed an update yesterday. I've just had so much on my plate at the moment and hopefully that will settle down in the next coming days or weeks. Once I complete the move that I'm doing, I'm actually moving into a more comfortable location to undergo my treatment. So I'm completely shifting houses, and I'll get some answers tomorrow afternoon from my oncologist about whenever I start that treatment. So anyone who's moved knows it just sucks, and it sucks more when I can't lift anything very heavy, and I also have my license suspended for 3 months. I haven't done anything wrong. After neurosurgery, they suspend your license for 3 or 6 months depending on the success of the surgery. So that's why if I don't upload a video, I apologize. I've got a lot on. But of course, depending on your time zone, either yesterday or today marks 1,000 days of this brutal, horrible war that has cost hundreds of thousands of lives and hundreds of billions of dollars and has really changed the geopolitical nature for potentially decades. And firstly, I just want to have a moment for all those that have lost their lives in such a terrible and unnecessary thing as war in general, but in here today especially. Now, I was there on those initial days, on the 24th of February 22, when the first missiles came in, live streaming that. And I just want to thank you guys for watching me since then, and well, there's even some before that. So thank you. And from the last time in this office, at least, we'll make more videos beyond this. But today in the video, guys, we have a lot to go over, but we're going to introduce things in the beginning that are going to become more relevant later on, but it's just the way to space out different parts because I want to introduce something and then talk about the specific later on, if that makes sense. So where we're going to start is we're going to look at the maps and a number of geolocations over multiple days as well. There has been some significant shifts on the maps, but we also need to look at what weapons are being used by some of these geolocations. That can tell us about what assaults may be going on and where some troops are operating too, sometimes well outside of grey zone, or where Ukraine is launching a new attack. Of course, last time we spoke, the major news was the US has said that Ukraine can use ATACMS and, of course, an American missile system inside of Russia. The UK and France then followed suit on the US, saying you can use these. And we have seen, at least Russia is claiming, the first use of these ATACMS hitting an ammo depot. We'll talk about that. But then that is going to link in with a few other little bits and pieces because Russia has updated its nuclear doctrine. Now, this just very conveniently falls in line when the US has signed off on these ATACMS going in. And then we need to look at then Zelenskyy's now 10-point resilience plan. So he has the 10-point peace plan, the 5-point victory plan, and now the 10-point resilience plan. But there's a few things in this which he's seeking some approval through the parliament for that is interesting. We need to look at that as well. And we have just a lot to go over, and I'll try and make up for missing yesterday. So first off the bat, I want to look at this marking the 1,000 days that Syriac has shared. After 1,000 days since beginning the Russian-Ukrainian war, Russian army currently controls 86,000 square kilometers, which corresponds to 14.3, though this isn't including the Crimean Peninsula, which is 18.85%. So 65% of Donetsk and 99.1% of Luhansk. Now, some maps actually show this 100%. That said, very close to this, and we do presume that Russia will really want 100% of especially Donetsk. But you can see where that has moved. He's not including Crimea in this. But the war has been going on for a long time, and we have seen a change in opinion. Now, Visegrad24, who is a media channel, I guess, very one-sided, but has shared this. 52% of Ukrainians would like to see their country negotiate an end to the war as soon as possible. 38% believe their country should keep fighting until victory. This is from Gallup's latest survey conducted in August and October. So what you can see by the green and the blue line is the Greens. Ukraine should continue fighting till it wins. So 38%. Ukraine should seek to negotiate. So over that in the blue, over that 50%. And of course, we have then the dotted line down here if you don't know or has refused to answer. So you can see as the war has gone on, public opinion is shifting on this war. Now, you know what I think about polls, but this is very interesting to see. Potentially one of the reasons we're not seeing any elections also. But then this is due to a number of things, such as conscription age, leading to a huge problem on the front line. Of course, Ukraine will only conscript you if you are over 25, or there is an element under, but if you've had military service previously. But Zelenskyy has said to the government he's not planning to lower mobilization age in Ukraine. This is a sticking point between Ukraine and the US, because the US, there are officials who have said, well, we conscripted at 18 for wars that we have been involved in. Why aren't you willing to do this? But you're asking for our arms. There is a sticking point here, and Ukraine has a manpower crisis, desperate for men on the front line. I don't care about systems, infantry. That is what Ukraine needs in huge, huge numbers. The Ministry of Defense and the Military Command have to create a new model of contracts for service in the armed forces of Ukraine for citizens who are yet to reach mobilization age, but want to show their best while defending Ukraine. These contracts have to have substantial and very real incentives. So of course, these people 18 to 25, these men and women, they can go and sign up. But, well, there's been available to now for 3 years. They haven't. What can you incentivize here to make that occur? What Russia has done is massive amounts of money, to the equivalent of $250,000 USD per year. That's sort of the incentive that Russia has gone down, and Ukraine, by not allowing this, needs to have, as he's saying here, some way to backfill this. No need for speculation. Our state is not planning to lower mobilization age. We have to use a new approach to army contracts to gradually rely on contracts rather than mobilization to shape our army. But I don't know how successful that is really going to be, and how popular, if the Ukrainian government followed what the Russians have done with, $250,000 for an individual soldier with bonuses and this and that. Well, all of the funding for that is coming out of the West, and there's already more of a popular movement towards, hey, this war needs to end, that I see in the West. And if it's going, we're paying individual Ukrainian men to sign up $250,000, I think there's going to be a lot of pushback on that. So I don't really know, if Ukraine's not willing to mobilize, I don't know how things are going to shift. But of course, we have seen Ukraine's victory plan. We have seen the 10-point peace plan. We've seen the 6-point peace plan from China, Brazil, and Turkey, of course, a NATO country that has kept open relations with Russia, has presented their peace plan as well. Now, we have the Kremlin's peace plan that was offered back whenever the Swiss peace conference was on, of course, taking the 4 oblasts and Crimea, absorbing them, no NATO entry, whatever. But this is from Erdogan. Now, we don't have this in full, but again, little bits, this is going to relate later on to what we speak about. Proposal would include Ukraine abstaining from joining NATO for at least 10 years, freezing the current front line, providing Ukraine with weapons, and deploying international troops to a demilitarized buffer zone in the country's east. The news outlet said Erdogan would propose the plan at G20 talks, which is going on now. Reacting to reports, the Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov has dismissed the proposal, saying the option of freezing the line of military conflict is unacceptable for the Russian side. So Russia has said no to this. Now, this realistically, this is what I actually believe the war will end like. I think with what I'm looking at the moment, the powers, I believe this is probably how it will look. There'll be an abstention from joining NATO for an amount of time. Frontline will freeze somewhere here unless we start seeing big breakthroughs. Ukraine will have some guarantee of security, more weapons, and potentially deployment of international troops. That said, we really don't know. Maybe it's going to be 20 years, maybe not at all. But this right here, let's just say this point in here, what is actually said to be proposed by Bloomberg. If the Kremlin offered this right now to the US with Trump offered this to Ukraine and the US with Trump coming in, what do you think? Do you actually think this would be accepted? If, of course, the Kremlin has dismissed this, saying no. But do you think if that was offered, do you think that would be pushed through? I think it may be. Now, of course, we're going to be talking about ATACMS striking military ammo depots later on in the video. But this is what I want to set up here, is probably the clearest footage actually down in Zaporizhia that's obviously not a decoy unless it's that good of a decoy. It is actually just one at this point, of a HIMARS being tracked by a Russian drone here and being struck by then a Lancet drone. So this convoy, and it has picked which vehicle it wants to in the middle. These go with an armed convoy, and then you can see the loitering Lancet here, and then a strike on the HIMARS there. Now, from what I've seen with the cab protection on this, so there's two drones actually in the air following this, so you can see the amount of drones that Russia can have in the air at the moment. I'd say the crew potentially is okay with the armoured cab, as it has hit where the arms are on this HIMARS system. But why I bring this up is with the introduction of ATACMS being able to be used back in Russia, I wouldn't be surprised if we see, as a byproduct of this, more of those HIMARS launches getting struck. Now, of course, Russia has the Fab glide bombs that in a couple of different variants, but they are really changing the front line. If there's a couple of weapons I would put as have changed the nature of the war, there's really 3, maybe 2. So actually, I'll go 4. So FPV drones on both sides. The second one for Ukraine, the most important system, I believe, is Starlink, that has actually changed the war individually. That's why I put, although everyone in NATO hates, what's his face, Elon, likely is the biggest individual supporter. If Starlink got switched off, the war would be done. And for Russia would be the glide bombs. Now, I was going to put in here the naval drones against the Black Sea Fleet, but we really haven't seen those operating recently at all. Russia seems to have got on top of them. Maybe the ships have moved away into areas they can't. We still see the ships operate in the Black Sea. So it's really that. FPV drones, the ability to use them through Starlink, and glide bombs. Now, this is something that I haven't seen. The Russian page is saying this is an OFZAB 500 UMPK, so a glide bomb, but a fragmentation, I've written down on this, fragmentation, high explosive, incendiary glide bomb, which I haven't seen one of these used yet. So we're looking on the center of your screen. You'll see it light up. So massive incendiary, then burning bomb here, so all over. I'm not sure if this works on some level of thermobaric, because there's another type like this, but you can see the length of which this does burn for in here. Maybe it's something it's hit, but again, potentially a new weapon system we have seen introduced onto the battlefield. So let's look at the map. So of course we have Ukraine in the center of your screen, the capital of Kyiv. The red areas occupied since 22, the purple since 2014. Now, I've got a lot of different folders here, but this is the first thing I want to look at if you are superstitious. So a lot of people call it the Zelenskyy curse, that Zelenskyy visits areas and then in the next couple of weeks that area comes under control. Well, if you believe in that superstition, only today and yesterday, Zelenskyy has visited Pokrovsk and Kupiansk. Now, Pokrovsk and Kupiansk are the most important areas currently in this war. If you're listening to bloggers and they're ignoring these areas as far as fighting, they're sharing propaganda. So, of course, we have Pokrovsk in here, the main central hub for this area of the front line that Russia's pushing on the flank of. Massively important to Ukraine's metallurgical coal and therefore economy. Hugely, hugely important area. Kupiansk, of course, up in the northeast. I keep saying east. East is a military hub for the northeastern then defense here as well. Of course, mixed in with this of Kharkiv. So you cannot downplay how important these are. Remember, in attritional warfare, anything without a vital industrial center or military center is irrelevant. Okay, so let's flick this on. We're going to go over a couple of map updates. And where I want to start is Kurakhove, as this is where we're seeing the most amount of move in here. So let's actually step back then to yesterday. So you can see around Kurakhove itself, Ilinkia, and just out from Seledov, we can see some red moving of the Russian forces. Then we move up to today and we see on similar axes, Yurivka, Vishneve, and then around Kurakhove, Beretsky, and Katrinivka, we can see some major shifts occurring on this map. Now we're going to put this all as one. So let's talk about Kurakhove itself for 1 minute. So we see this geolocation right here. So Kurakhove, we can see this road's on an angle just about where my cursor is, that we have footage of a Ukrainian tank being struck by a Russian artillery shell. So you can see the tank under here under some makeshift, this is for an FPV, like cover. And then we can see that struck, and that's about all we actually get of that. But we can see that tank being struck. Now, a couple of things I want to pull out of this straight away. Just like that HIMARS, the reason I show you this is that there are drones in the air over here. Now, what I have been saying again and again, what I saw a huge increase in this area from Minograd, where we showed you, Pokrovsk, and now here is the use of Krasnopol laser-guided artillery shells, which I believe that is. I believe the reason this drone is watching this isn't so you get a video of this, is to laze that and have the Krasnopol shell hit it. Now, that means, though you have to have drones in the air, drone in the air over this, just like over that system, so at least not the amount of ability to just keep those drones down, and those Krasnopol shells getting used more and more. Again, much harder to jam than a GPS guided shell. So again, shell fires, it has some maneuverability in the air, not like a missile, but it can be lased and hit a target. So that was targeted well out into here. There is also footage of tanks firing inside of Kurakhove. I don't have the footage on me that does suggest, well, there is real fighting going on inside of here. But I want to look at one more geolocation near Beretsky, of course, on the Kurakhove reservoir. So let's have a look at this. This is where the geolocation is, right on this corner here. We can see that there are Russian troops fighting through here, moving across here, drone drops as well. But what we see then at the end is we see then a flag put up confirming presence of Russian forces here. Now, what I want to show you, these houses down here, these nice houses with their own little dock out onto the reservoir, you can see the difference in infrastructure damage of here compared to like Volchansk, compared to Bakhmut, compared to Avdiivka, compared to Mariupol. You can see the pace at which the Russian forces are moving, that everything here is not completely just leveled. Like, of course, there's a lot of damage here, but it's not just completely leveled to no recognition. So that to me says the pace of the movements here as well. This does not look like what we have seen in some of this previous fighting. But this is very important because we had that information. What Russia is trying to do is get the North Bank here so they can have fire control straight across into Kurakhove. Of course, the defensive lines for Ukraine sit down in here. So we're not going to see a crossing across here. Those that believe that militaries are going to float across a reservoir like this in an environment with drones have fucking no idea what they're on about. They've never actually done military float. I've done mil float. It's fucking useless. Unless you're like some SF team in the middle of the night floating across here, you're going to be seen. You're going to get fucking whacked. Now, maybe some of you'd like to get whacked. Not in that way. Let's look at where some of the updates around here have been. So let's talk about this pocket down here around Katanivka, Antonivka, that is closing up. And we can see a major advancement down on the southern side of this road that runs through here by Suryak maps. And then let's go to the most recent one on day 1000 and have a look. So Ilininkia all the way through to the north of Ilininkia, he is saying has come under Russian control, and of course that more control on the south. So we know there is definitely some movement in this direction by those two maps. So while we're talking about this area, I want to come up to where we saw yesterday and today movement out to the west of Selidov. So let's have a look at this. So the exact area we're talking about is right in here near Yurivkia. Russian army captured new positions north of Selidov as well. So this is Selidov, and they're saying there's new positions. It is this paddock right in here, he has said, where my cursor is, that has come under control. Remember we saw that armoured assault up to this road, and now it looks like they have pushed beyond that, they by the Russians, and as well west of Vishnevy, Selidov. Of course, this whole thing is the part of the flank of Minograd and Pokrovsk. So let's keep just pushing down a little bit while we're on this front. Remember, we're staying down in here. Now, Velika Novosilivka, this is a very important area as the gateway behind that defensive position. Now, I want to go back to yesterday and turn then this on. Remember, we saw the red. So this front near Rozdolny, sort of hooking around behind some of these areas, and this is confirmed today by Syriac maps. So we can confirm, yep, that movement definitely then occurred. Now, where I want to go while we're on yesterday's map is actually up into then the occupation of an area of Kursk. So if we go between the 18th, when I last spoke to you, and yesterday to today, no change to today, but between those two dates, we do see in the north a reduction in grey zone and Ukrainian control of areas back into Russia. This also ties in, of course, with the nuclear doctrine, use of ATACMS we're going to talk about in a sec. So let's talk about Kursk. So a couple of updates in here. This is Syriac. So he's showing in the north where we saw that reduction, then a Russian control back. Not surprised to see this, but we do see that he's saying that around Pokrovsk, which is down in here, that Ukraine has then had some attack and do keep more position. Very similar actually now to what this map is showing. Of course, this dot is Borky. So very similar now in this area. It'll be interesting to see what occurs in here. But what I've said is logistics into here is going to be very, very difficult come winter and the poorer months, especially with Russia having the logistical overmatch in here. There's some that say Russia won't have that. That's ridiculous. They're definitely going to have that straight from Kursk into here, but also the threat of maybe pushing back into Sumy. I believe Ukraine may need to pull out of here before that harsh winter hits. But again, we will see. But some evidence of this is at Yunikivka, which is down in here, which is this main road that is leading into Suja. Of course, this is where all the supplies, not all, but the majority of supplies are going to come down this road into here. Now, the reason I bring up this footage is to show that Russia has drones over the top of that exact area and are dropping multiple Iskanders. Here we see 2 Iskander missiles, ballistic missiles, being dropped on targets in here. Of course, trying to get areas before it's staged in here and that military hardware moves into areas like Suja. It's going to become more and more difficult when the roads get poor, when the weather gets poor. But this, of course, is one of the most important areas politically with what we keep hearing about, the deployment, the killing, the desertion of North Korean soldiers. Again, I'll reiterate this until there's evidence. Someone who looks Asian does not then mean that they're a North Korean fighting for the Russian army. We have not seen a scrap of actual evidence of this yet. As soon as we see it, if we see it, I will share it. But the longer this goes on, the more I'm thinking we're not going to see these guys. And like I've said here, in my opinion, North Korean troops have more propaganda value for Ukraine, saying there's another country ending here, we need more. And what we've seen as a byproduct of this is Ukraine then has permissions for ATACMS long-range strikes, Storm Shadow scalps. So there's been that has been already proven. We haven't seen any of these North Koreans. So just selling the story of this has got Ukraine one of the items it has needed. That's been very effective propaganda. We haven't then seen these guys fighting. And if it's 10,000 guys that have no experience, don't speak the language, I think even then, how effective? Well, I don't know. And Zelenskyy has doubled down. They're saying now Putin has brought 11,000 North Korean troops to Ukraine's borders. The contingent may grow to 100,000. Now, I'm not sure if he means in rotations or in total, but still we can see the effective use of information war here. Will we ever see North Koreans fight? I don't know. It depends what blog you listen to. Apparently they've been fighting there for a month and they're deserted, POWs, fucking whatever. Anyway, when we see it, we will report it. Now, let's come down into another interesting area, of course, of Toretsk, where we know there's a lot of fighting. Now, we can see just a small bit of ground being shown on this map, but I want to show you a geolocation that is very, very interesting, but I cannot show you some of the footage. Again, all the footage, if you want to see it, is going to be on the Telegram. Now, today is the 20th of November. This footage is from the 13th of November, so 1 week ago. But the easiest ways to line it up is off this road and then this stadium or green area. It's right on the corner where these two would meet if you were to intersect lines off them. So right in here, what we can see are Russian troops being then intercepted by a Ukrainian drone. So definitely presence well out in here, which in urban areas like this is very significant. So let's go. It would intersect, say there, say some 600 meters. That is the page I saw reporting was about the same. We can see Noel reports he is sharing similar, that there is a movement there. Again, a Ukrainian sources map, and Suryak is also sharing this. So definitely large movements in the center of Toretsk. So again, we will wait and see how that develops further. Let's move up into the north. This is where Ukraine has had an armored assault. Interesting area for this. We've seen other assaults into Haliboki. This is in the Kharkiv front here. Now, depending on what pages you look, some will say this was a great success, some will say it wasn't. There are large losses in this video. Again, I can't show you this. YouTube, you can show more Russian losses on YouTube than Ukrainian, but either way, I want to stay monetized. I've got rent to pay, but we can see a Ukrainian armored assault into here, multiple vehicles getting struck, multiple guys hit. But again, like I said, this is attritional war. Just because a convoy takes large losses or a column takes large losses does not mean the attack failed. It's the way it's edited, this and that. That's why we see all these Russian columns getting hit, but ground being made. And this could be the same, but on the reverse side. So this is just down here, right on the corner of this tree line where it's assaulting, trying to break into those Russian lines. The success of this, I don't have anything further on that yet. As soon as it becomes available, I will let you know. Now, just east of here, of course, we have the Pishani front. The Pishani being used to get to the Oskil and split this into a north and south element has made Kupiansk vulnerable, but of course made this whole area out from Berestov at risk as well. So this is where the map is showing today, but I want to show you this geolocation. So we see just the corner operating out here at the Oskil, just on sort of the border right in around here. We can see that Russian infantry being targeted by a Ukrainian drone. Again, I can't show you this. You can see where the soldiers are moving around in here, and then there is a building blown up that they move into. But definitely a presence out here as of this time. Then we look on the Suryak map, and he shows movement out into this similar area right in here into this village. So there are definitely some movements. The last map update I want to show you, of course, we have Bakhmut, we have Chasiv Yar, we have the map ignoring this front, but all things, death and taxes are, part of life. But we do have, Noel reports showing that Russian forces have moved into Chasiv Yar itself. So the easiest way, again, to look at this will be where this reservoir is right in here. So this area in here, that he's saying this is where the Russian forces have broken into. We've shown you some geolocations in previous updates, specifically talking about this. Now let's talk about ATACMS, and let's look at nuclear doctrine changes. So Bryansk last night was hit by something. Some are saying it was ATACMS, some are saying it is drones. Now, where it originates, the ATACMS, is actually off the Russian Ministry of Defense. At 0325, I'm guessing, the enemy struck a target in the Bryansk region with 6 ballistic missiles, American-made ATACMS. The result, combat cruise S-400 and Panzer defense missile gun shot down 5 missiles and damaged 1. Fragments fell, causing a fire that was extinguished quickly. As always, whether it is Russia or Ukraine, there's this massive amount of interception rate, and then we see some footage going, well, maybe 1 or 2 got through Russia. So it does look like some of these did hit. Again, what we don't know any of this until we get satellite imagery, but I'll show you some footage of this. A little bit of swearing. We can see a large explosion here. Again, what these were targeting was an ammo depot, so it's not surprising to see this. They're saying it's a missile, some saying it's not. The thing is with this is you're going to have intercept missiles in the air, so even if they were Ukrainian drones, it's going to be Russian missiles trying to intercept those too. So again, wait and see, but I wouldn't be surprised. Ukraine did say we'll use ATACMS in the next couple of days. Now, it's against the Chernihiv, this area here of the GRAU, which is an ammo dump, ammo depot, whatever you call it, but right next to a city. Great place to put it. But we can go from the border here of where I've put it behind because the truck's not going to drive to the border and fire the bloody thing. About 140 kilometers away. ATACMS have a max range of around 300. And of course, that goes into account of weather conditions, targeting, all this sort of stuff as well. So realistically, could it have been the first use case of ATACMS inside Russia? I believe likely so. And allegedly, this is footage of these then ATACMS being launched from those systems going up as well. And then we can see another photograph that is being shared around here too of targeting on that ammo depot. So I think highly likely it was ATACMS. Damage there, I won't talk about that. Some will say it's destroyed, I'm guessing. But until we get imagery of that. And again, with these striking ammo depots, Russia is notorious for having massive amounts of ammo sitting outside for absolute decades as well. Like those other ammo dumps that have been hit, the real battle damage assessment that we will get is, do we see an effect on the front? Those other ones that we hit that made that massive explosion, have we seen a limiting of shells or missiles being used? In my opinion, no, we haven't. So again, will we see? But again, against a military facility, could we see ATACMS being used against critical infrastructure? That may be one of the lines that the US has said, no, you can't use it for. Again, wait and see. But what we have now seen is an update in Russia's nuclear doctrine. So we'll go over this quickly. We've talked about their nuclear doctrine a lot, and we've talked about how nuclear weapons are used by the states that have nuclear weapons, how they're used every single day. Nuclear weapons don't need to be exploding to be incredibly useful in deterrence, in coercion, in pushing the way you want. The way nuclear states can operate in the world stage is different to how non-nuclear ones can act. Whether it's fair or not is irrelevant. It's the way that it is. I believe it's unfair. That's why if I was the president, if Australia had a president and I was the president, the prime minister doesn't have this sort of power, I'd be looking for nuclear weapons. And if I was Ukraine and the war fell silent, I'd be looking for them as well as that ultimate deterrence package. But here we go. Executive order. This is from Putin, approving the basic principles of state policy of the Russian Federation on nuclear deterrence. Executive order approving basic principles of state policy. So an update to nuclear deterrence doctrine when these can be used. The update doctrine says an attack against Russia by a non-nuclear power with the participation or support of a nuclear power will be seen as their joint attack on the Russian Federation. So there is important nuance to add here, but what it is Ukraine, of course, is a non-nuclear power. America is a nuclear power. But if that non-nuclear power, Ukraine, uses a weapon supplied and supported by a nuclear power, America, that's seen as a joint attack. Is Russia going to start pushing the red button on ATACMS? Absolutely not. But this is a tool of deterrence of these systems. And while the risk is there, it's still relevant to take into account. And we see US and other NATO officials saying if Russia didn't have nuclear weapons, we would have sent in troops, done this or that. So it's still, officials still take this in. The officials that really matter of these other major powers are still taking this in as a real risk. But it avoids any firm commitment and mentions the uncertainty of scale, time and place, and possible use of nuclear deterrent among key principles of the nuclear deterrent. So again, realistically, it needs to be a threat to the existence of the state before anything like this is ever going to happen. And ATACMS are not going to do that. It's going to make the war more difficult and more expensive, but it's not going to threaten the state. Document also notes the aggression by Russia by a member of a military bloc or coalition is viewed as an aggression by the entire bloc. So, of course, Ukraine's not in NATO, but if there's aggression by a country that is friendly towards a military bloc or coalition, you know exactly who they're talking about here. Again, sort of links into number one of then aggression by that bloc as well. And this is what then, of course, the chair of the Security Council, Dmitry Medvedev, has said Russia's new nuclear doctrine means NATO missiles fired against our country could be deemed an attack by the bloc on Russia. Russia could retaliate with weapons of mass destruction against Kyiv and key NATO facilities, which they won't do, at least nuclear-wise. Wherever they're located, that means World War III. Again, this is threats, but these are not empty threats like some will point, but these are threats. These aren't going to be fulfilled now, especially with Russia advancing on the battlefield and having, the upper hand at the moment. These are not completely empty threats, but it is more saber rattling. Nuclear saber rattling is, of course, one of the tools that nuclear states use. But this is actually the breakdown of the fundamental state policy by the Russian Federation in the field of nuclear deterrence. And these are some of the general provisions. Reflect the official views of the essence of nuclear deterrence, define military dangers and threats for the neutralization of which nuclear deterrence is carried out, the principles of nuclear deterrence, as well as conditions for the transition of the Russian Federation to the use of nuclear weapons. So the transition between conventional and going into nuclear. This is what I say. There is no such thing as a tactical nuclear weapon. I hate the term. There's small and large yield bombs, from a shell to the Saab bomber, from 100 megatons to 0.5. But all nuclear weapons are strategic. They're used strategically every single day for the way that China, America, Russia, France, UK, whoever want to operate on the global international relations stage. It has that effect. That's strategic, as well as a single nuclear shell to a SAR bomber was dropped. It's strategic. It's not a tactical system. If you want to know the difference between tactical and strategic, just think what affects massive, what affects here and now. Deterrence of aggression is issued by the entire military might of the Russian Federation, including nuclear weapons for enemy aggression against the Federation or one of its allies, which of course could include Iran, North Korea, or we definitely know it includes Belarus. I don't see that Russia would go into something like that for Iran or North Korea. And you can change that to other states coming to the aid of another state, knowing the fallout of this. Is Moscow going to have an extinction level event for Iran or North Korea? This is the reverse of what, like John Mearsheimer, Professor Mearsheimer, will say about Ukraine. America is not going to jeopardize an extinction or jeopardize America and an extinction level event for Ukraine if this were to happen one way or the other. But it's nuclear deterrence means to prevent aggression against the Russian Federation and or its allies. So nuke weapons can be a tool of influence, tool of coercion, both ways. Basically, it is a gun to someone's head, a gun to each other's head, being in the mutually assured destruction of WMDs. But there is also an ability for nuclear weapons to be used to escalate, to de-escalate. This is exactly what happened in Japan. You escalate to such an extent that then your enemy is forced to de-escalate. And this is what some theorists have said that Russia could do. If Russia dropped one of these bombs somewhere, even if they dropped it in Kursk, which is in their territory, would it escalate so far that Western states would go, yeah, look, we need to step out of this and have some level of agreement? Could it be used as a de-escalatory step of the ultimate escalation? Goes back into what we said, is Russia, are they going to step into this sort of thing for Iran, or is the US going to step in for Ukraine? It's up to you guys to decide. State policy in the area of nuclear deterrence is defensive in nature, aimed at maintaining potential of nuclear forces at a level sufficient to ensure nuclear deterrence and guarantees the protection of sovereignty and territorial integrity of the state. Exactly why, if I was Australia, if I was the leader here, I'd be like, let's get some of those bad boys. Deterrence of a potential enemy from aggression against Russian Federation and its allies. And in the event of military conflict, preventing the escalation of military actions and the termination on terms acceptable to the Russian Federation and or its allies. So preventing further escalation and terminating terms that are acceptable to Russia and allies of War II. These are important points. The Russian Federation considers nuclear weapons as a means of deterrence, the use which is an extreme and necessary measure. So if they have to use it, it's seen as deterrence, but it's extreme. Will we see these? I really hope not. I don't believe we're in any sort of corner backing of anyone far enough to use these. The essence of nuclear deterrence. The Russian Federation shall exercise nuclear deterrence with respect to a potential enemy, which shall be understood as individual states and military coalitions, blocs, or alliances. I wonder who. The regards of Russian Federation as a potential enemy and possesses nuclear and or other types of weapons of mass destruction or significant combat potential or general purpose factors. Again, like we looked at before when I broke down, a bloc or a country that is a nuclear country supporting one that is not aggression by state, any part of the military coalition, against the Russian Federation, and so is considered an aggression by the whole coalition. So anything there is taken as one. It's sort of the flip side of any attack against NATO is seen as an attack on all. Any attack by that, he's saying, is an attack by all. During attack by them, nuclear deterrence is aimed at ensuring the potential adversary understands the inevitability of retaliation. So we know what will happen on the next one. Again, this is a lot of saber rattling, but it's still relevant. Conditions for the transition of the Russian Federation to the use of nuclear weapons. So when did it actually go nuclear? The event of aggression against the Russian Federation and the Republic of Belarus as participants of the Union State with the use of conventional weapons, creating a critical threat to their sovereignty and territorial integrity. This is important. So if there's a threat to Russia or Belarus's own sovereignty or territorial integrity, there could be a use of these. ATACMS are not going to have that much of an effect, but it's aimed at sort of stopping the further escalation by the US giving this weapon system. They're going, don't give tomahawks. That's what I see. The receipt of reliable information about the launch of ballistic missiles. So if there are ballistic missiles in the air, then we could strike back. Now, We saw in 1 week 2 strikes against nuclear systems from Ukraine, I want to say 6 to 12 months ago, striking one over-the-horizon radar and one other radar system. I forgot what the other one was. It was slightly different. But those radar systems were part of Russia's nuclear whole system to see ballistic missiles. Now, 2 strikes in like 2 or 3 days, and then that stopped dead. What I would say is these were systems to pick up missiles coming that America said, don't strike that because we want those working correctly, because we don't want Russia getting a false reading and pushing the button, and we don't want that seen as a strike against nuclear facilities. So we saw it in a couple of days and then just dead silence since then. In Charlie, the enemy's impact on critically important state or military facilities on the Russian Federation, incapacitation of which would lead to the disruption response actions of nuclear forces, aggression against the Russian Federation and Republic of Belarus as participants of the Union state, with the use of conventional weapons creating a critical threat to their sovereignty and integrity. So if there's a threat to the existence of the states, their response can be nuclear. Would it be? I still don't know, because you know from that point, it gets absolutely out of hand very quickly. I love people that share those videos of, oh, this is Russia and American nuclear strike, and you realize ones are going the other way. And people that say these won't, yes, have been failures of some of these, but there's multiple ways to deliver these systems, from missiles that we have seen used as the delivery system, which just have a different warhead on it. And there's a lot of ability for one-way strikes from Tu-160, Tu-95s. So don't just say, no, none of this will work. Well, that's wrong, because there's cosmonauts on the International Space Station right now. We know those missiles work. We know rocket technology and stuff exists to put someone into space, into orbit. Definitely exists to deliver one of these somewhere. So you can't just discredit all of this, nor should you take it as a huge, like this is going to happen tomorrow. Now, we love numbering plans, apparently. So we have the victory plan, the peace plan, and now we have the 10-point resilience plan. This is what Zelenskyy has then shown to the government. But he says we must not collapse now, so the occupier collapses, not us. We need internal resilience. This is after the ex-foreign minister, Minister of Foreign Affairs, has talked about the risk of internal collapse. And I've spoken about this as well, and pointing out the 1,000 days, but presenting the then 10-point resilience plan. We'll go through this. Basically, the TLDR is unity, front, armament, money, energy, security, communities, human capital, cultural sovereignty, and heroes policy. Unity, according to the head of state, without unity, the necessary results of victory plan cannot be achieved. So we need to come together, implementing decisions necessary for Ukraine to become the fastest country to join the European Union and give Ukraine the right for NATO membership. So what we need for those as well, for the EU, NATO, it's not just acceptance of that. Ukraine does need to meet minimum standards for this as well. So there's a lot of people, especially in corrupt politicians, corrupt oligarchs, who are really preventing any movement on that too. So coming together, and then so we are not, as he said, why nations are not rejected. Front provides specific measures to stabilise the front, enhance technological capabilities. Again, in this, I would say manpower. That's what is needed. Changing approaches to personnel management. Of course, there's a lot of negative outlooks on some of the National Guard and the recruiting here, and spreading the best management practice applied to some units to all elements of the defence and security forces in Ukraine. So changing up into the internal unity, armament, expanding domestic production of guns and artillery shells, missiles and drones in cooperation with partners. There is no doubt that simply increasing production is not enough. We need to surpass Russia in technology. But also, I think one of the things that needs to be accepted, this is what I think the reason Ukraine's in one of the positions it's in, is Ukraine and the West has not accepted the attritional aspect of war, that quantity is a quality of its own, whether it's shells, whether it's weapons, whether it is training of men at the front line to a degree too. I still think there's this, we're going to technology overmatch and skill overmatch and this and that. And I go, against defensive positions, attritional, it may look like we are seeing of those large losses in attacks. So we will see. I think just the production on mass is incredibly important. We have seen, I saw the same page today say that the West has delivered 700,000 of its million shells promised. North Korea has supplied Russia in the somewhere vicinity of 9 million shells, and the same guy then posted and said, and if you believe the numbers, said Ukraine produced 2.5 million shells. And I can tell you right now, Ukraine is not outproducing the entire amount of the West in shell production at this point. So again, any numbers online, whether it's casualties, weapons, whatever, grain of salt. The fourth point, money, is about building a new economic policy based on supporting Ukrainian entrepreneurship and de-shadowing businesses. But this goes into point number 8, I believe, that could become a problem. We'll talk about that in a second. But the preservation of human capital through the ability of Ukrainians to realise themselves and their aspirations in Ukraine. So you need people as well for economic growth. Potentially that can stabilise the crisis around baby shortage and replacement rate that Ukraine has too. Russia's having a huge problem with that too. Fifth point, energy, is protection for energy facilities. Of course, without this, you can't have entrepreneurship, businesses. Sixth point is security internally as well. And then this is where I want to get into some of these other parts. So yeah, eighth point, communities based on creating highly effective systems of governance within communities. We must not forget our communities that are currently in temporarily occupied territories. This is something that is forgotten about all the time, is there's all these Ukrainians on the other side of that border too that have it very, very difficult. Now the eighth point is human capital. This is the most important thing I've seen in here. Preserving human capital, the creation of an institute of multiple citizenships. So if you're a Ukrainian passport holder, you're a Ukrainian citizen, you can't have multiple citizenships. You can't be an Australian and a Ukrainian citizen holder. As far as my belief goes, and I'm pretty sure I'm 99% correct. Same with the US, same with whatever. That what then they want to bring in is to have the ability to have multiple citizenships. The problem is, without tax conditions, many will go and work abroad. If you can gain citizenship somewhere else in the West, the money is going to be significantly better. And we see in point number 3, was it? About entrepreneurship, the fourth point, Ukrainian entrepreneurship. Again, what you may do is just lose these guys to the US. The US is the best place in the world to be an entrepreneur. Even if the tax is high, again, this could become for what a good thing, because I believe in, able to hold multiple citizenships and move around and whatever. But could you just have a huge exodus of people as well who will go, well, I can either be this or that. I'm going to go and follow that. Anyway, ninth point. Oh, did I miss one in here? No. Cultural sovereignty. And creation of a event calendar for Ukrainian culture in all regions of the world in order to systemically support Ukrainian content. So people in the States won't get this, but we have like the Queen's birthday in Australia. We celebrate that. Multiple other holidays around. We have like a Greek festival down the road from here, whatever, that on the calendar year there will be something to celebrate Ukraine. The 10th point, the heroes policy, perhaps the most morally significant one, transition of military service to veteran status. So you'll get health and rehab, like a defence, a veteran affairs, programs, network of veterans in space in each region of Ukraine, introduction of economic and social support programs for veterans, assistance to the purchase of housing for veterans, the fifth, focus on education initiative for veterans and their children. Annexes we presented this December to lead Ukraine from war to peace. Now, there's a few interesting bits in here. So let's focus on this policy first for like support of veterans, which is unbelievably important. And I see the effect on veterans of war. And I see the effect on veterans from like insurgent skirmish wars. I'd hate to know what it's going to look like after this. I'm not old enough, of course, to see the effect that it had on guys from World War II. I do see it with Vietnam, and this war is absolutely horrible, and it will have huge economic impacts with that element. But again, I do see this as a way to hope for Ukraine, hoping to bolster recruitment too, that there's all these incentives to join now and say for educational initiatives for your children to try and get more numbers, because we won't see that mobilisation age drop. So I think that's a couple of prongs. One, the moral aspect of you should look after the people that fought for you. You should look after the families of those who have fallen for you, but also we need more men too. But lead Ukraine from war to peace. Well, this is the thing. We've seen, I believe this is a bit of messaging too. We could see an end to this war soon. We didn't talk about like that transition at any point until very recently. And that transition, we think how things are looking at the front, maybe sooner rather than later, especially with Trump coming into office. Again, we will see. And we'll see what the war brings in the next months and potentially the next weeks or even the next years as things shift, with Russia turning back Turkey's proposal, which at this point in time is, I actually believe, fairly reasonable. But we see the goals and aspirations of Ukraine to regain this border. We see the goals and aspiration of Russia to try and regain then the 4 oblasts and Crimea, or gain all of that, the whole 100% of Crimea. Again, I don't know how Trump is going to navigate something in this, especially because it's going to look like a US Western loss too if Russia walk away with these areas. So how will that be solved? I don't know. Legends, have a great day. Look after yourself. If you'd like to support me, the link's down below, but otherwise, don't feel obliged. I'll speak to you tomorrow, hopefully tomorrow. Thank you. Bye-bye.